coming to this MESAS event this evening. We're going to go ahead and get started, even though I'm sure some more people will come straggling in, just for those who have the study abroad prep class later. We don't want to get Bill angry. So tonight we are pleased to have Dr. Mecham come and talk to us about his thoughts on what we can do with our degrees, and I guess answer our questions as well that we have about our plans going forward. So also, before we move into Dr. Mecham's presentation, just a couple of quick announcements. Tonight at 7:30, I think. 7. Oh, okay. A new club on campus, Refugee Empowerment Committee, wow, I should have written this all down, is having their first meeting, and that's tonight at 7 in this room. And so, great opportunity to get involved with refugees. Also on the same note, not next Wednesday, but the 24th at 2 p.m. Is that a Thursday? All right. Thursday, the 24th at 2 p.m., we're going to have a panel with some current and former BYU students that are currently working with refugees, and they're going to talk to us about efforts that are going on in the Utah community and how students can get involved. So mark that on your calendars for the 24th at 2 p.m. It's going to be really awesome. And we'll go ahead and start with an opening prayer. Can we have Tate offer that for us?
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful that we can come together and learn from the expertise and the experience of Dr. Mecham. And Father, we're grateful for the privilege we have to study at this university, and pray that as we move forward, advancing towards our careers, we may be guided and appreciate thy hand in all things. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Thanks, Tate. So we'll go ahead and turn the time over to Dr. Mecham and learn from him.
Thanks. All right. Well, I see a lot of folks I like here. The one thing that makes me nervous is that a lot of you are pretty senior in college. And I wish in some ways that folks were having this conversation when they were first or second years in school, because a lot of what I'm going to talk about I think has implications for how you think about what to get out of college. But my aspiration is just to share some specific remarks and a few slides until 5:30, and then who's leaving at 5:30? And for those of you that are taking off, I'm happy to have conversations and specific questions, but maybe I'll end just a couple minutes before that if you have specific questions that you want to make sure that I address. Okay, just a couple of things by way of background. I've had a weird career. So I'm one of the only people on campus that I know of that has had a public sector career, a private sector career, and an academic career. And I still try to have all three of those sometimes. So I feel like I kind of understand a bit how those different sectors work. I've also had about a lot of students, MESA-related students, go off and get jobs and go to graduate school, and so I kind of have a sense of where people are going and how hard it is for them to get into different places, and what they try and what works and what doesn't work. And so those are the kinds of things that I can likely share. I want to take the first few minutes, though, and give you a much broader, holistic perspective, and we can move increasingly in a tactical direction as time goes on. The MESA major is what I would call a liberal arts major. Okay, like linguistics, like humanities, like history, and like political science. Okay, and I'm a huge fan of liberal arts majors. I think that they prepare you better for the kind of world that you're going to be living in over the next 40 years than a technical major does on campus. And the main reason I think that is because the kind of skills that you need over the next 40 years, you cannot learn in any technical major on campus right now. because the world is going to change so much that it's going to become obsolete. And therefore, it's not a bad idea to have some technical skills. We'll talk through how to get through some of those. But the kind of skills that you actually need to make money and thrive and be happy in a career are largely what I would consider to be liberal arts skills. And I want to talk you through a couple of those, and I'm going to actually make you do a quick exercise here in a minute. So this is what I'm going to talk about the next half hour. What should you get out of college while you're here? How to think about your own comparative advantage. Where do MESA majors actually go for careers? If you want to go in a particular direction, what should you do before you graduate? How to think about graduate school, whether to go and how to get ready, and some extra resources available, okay? So my perspective on what you need from college looks something like this. That if I had a wish for you before you graduate, it would be that you are rock solid on all of those comprehensive skills on the top part of that page, and that you have some degree of technical competence in a technical skill of your choice on the second set of bullets. So the exercise I want you to do right now is I'd just like you to pull out, computer, phone, whatever, piece of paper, and at this moment, try to rank yourself on those top 7 skills, scale of 1 to 10. How good do you think you are, 10 being high, on those 7 skills up top? And I should just be a little bit clear as you're doing that. Deductive reasoning, right, is the ability to think about an abstract problem and come up with a rationally sound, hypothesis-driven way of solving that problem. Inductive reasoning is the ability to observe a wide variety of events in the world and make sense of them and figure out what that means, right? So a lot of what you do when you travel abroad, for example, is you're gaining all of these observations, all of this inductive stuff, and the ability to take all of that and make sense of it is what we call inductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning can happen in your bedroom. Inductive reasoning means you have to go out and see the world, okay? Learning how to learn is, measured by, if I said, Tanner, I would like you, in the next week to be my research assistant number 1 on how to grow oranges, okay? He has no ability, I don't think you do, right? You're not really an orange grower. So he has no technical ability to be able to answer that question. But I want him to be able to have a very curious, rapid-fire learning ability to be able to do that, on short notice. And that is something that you really need to try to maximize over the course of your college career as well, because you're going to be doing that for the next 40 years. Okay, so I'm not going to call you out on this, but I'd just like you to get a sense of where you think your strengths are and where you think your gaps are in those areas. Some of these things are learned in lecture halls and some are not, right? So collaboration and leadership is not. That's the kind of thing that you have to learn in other places, right? You join an extracurricular organization, you start something up on campus, you work in a working group, you find ways of building alignment and figuring out who stakeholders are to get stuff actually done. That's a core skill that you're not taught from a lector. Risk tolerance and resilience. Okay, what I mean by that is that you've got to know how to fail, and you just got to do it all the time. Okay, and what I mean by that is not getting F's in your classes. It just means trying things that you're not good at, figuring out what works and what doesn't, and doing it better next time. Okay, that's what that means, and the ability to, when you get knocked down and this doesn't work like you thought it would work, being able to get right back up and jump in and get excited about it and do it again. One of my favorite lines from Winston Churchill, right, who got knocked down and stood up all the time throughout his career, is that success is moving from failure to failure without a subsequent loss of enthusiasm. And I think that there's a lot of truth in that. That's what I mean by resilience. So those of you that have been on missions, right, you get a bunch of lessons in some of this stuff, right? You get lessons in collaboration and leadership, you get lessons in risk taking and resilience. Just think about how to bring this broader skill set into your college experience. I promise you that when you come to my office 20 years from now, right, and you're the head of something somewhere, right, we talk about what you do during the day and what's made you successful. It's going to be that stuff. Try to get as much of it as you can. And that has implications for what kind of classes you choose, right? It has implications for what you do outside of the classroom as well. So technical skills, we make you, in the MESA major, we make you get one technical skill, which is Arabic, okay? I encourage you to think about getting another technical skill. Technical skills can also be obtained in graduate school. So if you think that you might be going to graduate school, it is a good place to get technical skills. If you're not planning to go to graduate school, I would encourage you to take another technical skill pretty seriously, whether it be in the form of a minor, going and getting a business minor, going and getting some serious statistical experience. You can do some analytics, or something that makes you technically proficient beyond just your Arabic skill set. Your Arabic skill set will be helpful in a lot of professions, and it will be critical only if you become a translator, right? Or an Arabic linguist. And in that case, it becomes critical and becomes your core skill set. In most other careers, it is helpful, right? It is an advantage to have it, but it is not what you do every single day. So think about other options. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. Any questions on any of these skills and what I mean by them before I move on? Okay, now I want to turn to you and how to think about what you personally should do. And this requires some heavy-duty thinking on your part, okay? It's not something I can tell you without asking you tons and tons of questions. But I want you to think about the intersection of three circles in your life. So you all know what a Venn diagram is, where circles overlap. I'm going to show you a Venn diagram, and that Venn diagram has a bunch of things that you are comparatively good at. Okay? You don't have to be amazing, but when I think about Chase, or Tate, and say, what are Chase's strengths? These are the kinds of things that come to mind, right? So one bucket is your strengths. A second bucket is what you love, okay? Things that give you energy, things that get you excited, that if you weren't being paid for them, you'd do them anyway. And then the third circle in this Venn diagram is what people will pay you to do, all right? So for most people, it's different. It's a different shape for different people. But in an ideal world, there are going to be things that fit into all three of those categories. So here we've got, all the stuff that you've been trained to do that you're pretty good at. In high school, I was pretty good at math. I was like a math champion. They sent me out to do like math competitions, okay? And that fit in my what I was good at category. It did not fit in the category of what I love, all right? I wanted to be a rock star. That was my main aspiration when I was 17 years old, okay? Unfortunately, I'm kind of tone deaf, and I don't have a lot of dexterity in my fingers, and so my guitar skills are not particularly good. And so as much as I love music, it was going to take a whole lot of effort for me to ever become mediocre, okay? At that. And so those things, were not in the overlapping areas. And over time, I started to play around with other things, and I discovered that I really love people. I just really love working with people. I really love organizations, and I started to gravitate more towards social science. And I have kind of an analytical mindset, right? I'm comparatively good at that. And so I can take the energy I get from really being interested in people and organizations with this kind of structured analytical temperament that I have, and I kind of figured out ways of doing that. And then I threw some values in there, like I really care about people living and thriving and being happy. And then I said, when doesn't that happen? How can I make a difference to make that happen better, right? So I started studying things like civil wars. I started to find things that give me a lot of energy, that I'm comparatively good at, and then I found somebody to pay to do it. And so I'm currently living in that overlap, right? And that is the happy, healthy place where you will have a long and productive career. If you are outside of that triple overlap, right, you're going to be restless. You're going to feel like, I'm just not loving my job. Or I just, I can persistently moving from job to job and I'm not, being able to pay for what I need to pay for, right? Or I'm just not rising up because I'm not as good as the other people that are doing this, right? So the conversation you need to have with yourself is really to try to define those first two circles, what you're good at and what you love. And then the rest of this conversation is really going to be about that third circle, and what people would actually pay you to do. But that's only a piece of the puzzle. This is not comprehensive. But when I look out at all the people who have done Middle Eastern studies over the past number of years and tried to think of where they go, what they do, and how they get paid, it looks something like this. All right? And so what I'm inviting you to do is to think through the branches of that tree and to think about what you love and what you're good at, and which of those branches resonate with you better than other branches. Because MESA is a liberal arts degree, you can do a lot of things with it, right? I mean, if you really had a technical skill of playing basketball, you could certainly go play professional basketball if you wanted. The son of the president of the American University of Beirut, Steve Kerr, right? Ended up, he had a career, he studied Middle East studies because that was his dad's profession, and then he went off and became an NBA basketball player. But I know all of you well enough to think that I'm not going to hold my breath on that. All right? So these tend to be the kind of places that people go. And as time permits, we can have a very specific conversation about what you should be doing now if you think that you want to go down one of these particular tracks. Because the time to start making plans to enter those tracks is as a junior and senior in college, right? Some of those tracks are require graduate school, more than others. But all of those you can get jobs in right out of college to some degree, and just depending on the kind of direction you want to take that, it might lead you to a particular graduate school pathway. So I think that we'll come back to this slide here in a minute and talk through some of the specifics on that. But before other people go, I want to get through a few other things. If I were you, before I graduated, I would try to make sure that I had the following sets of experiences. Okay? This is in addition to the skills that I want you to develop. So one of the great things about the MESA major is we give you a lot of stuff to give you those skills. We make you go abroad, and we make you go abroad to a place that is kind of psychically challenging, right? That stretches you a bit, and make you learn another language to a reasonably high degree of proficiency. And I think every single person at the university should do that. That's my own opinion, but we give you that. I think that you also need another kind of international experience. And so you have some comparative stuff to play with, right? So that you just don't have only one experience. For some of you, that's a mission abroad, right? For others of you, that might be an internship or taking 3 months and backpacking, in Africa or doing something. But something to give you just a little bit of a broader perspective. If you really want to understand the Middle East, or if you really want to understand where you come from, you can only do that by comparing it to other things. and therefore you need to have a little bit of that comparative experience. I do that on steroids, so I'm not asking you to do what I do, but I'm going to Sweden tomorrow, and it's my 70th country, so you don't need to do that. Although if you want to figure out how to do it, I'll try to coach you on it. But what I feel like that's given me is that just gives me so much in the way of being able to compare one experience with others that I've had, right? And it helps me to situate and has, you know, that inference, that inductive reasoning that I was talking about becomes much easier when you have comparative experiences. I think everybody should do an internship. An internship does a couple of things you can't get out of regular college, right? It helps you figure out, do you like doing this kind of thing? And whether the answer is yes or no, that's really valuable information for you to have. And it's relatively risk-free. You may or may not get paid, but you learn something about yourself, you gain some outside of classroom experiences, and particularly if you're not going to go to graduate school, I think you should do 2 internships before you graduate, right? If you are going to graduate school, you probably pick another one up in graduate school. But again, you want to have that comparative experience. I would start to think about, what kind of organizations do I love? What places do I think do really cool things that I like? Who are the people that have ended up in those organizations? What do they do? And just start to collect some of those folks. You can do that on LinkedIn. You want to have some sort of professional web presence before you graduate. It'd be good to just have a one-page website, right, that you put up that says, this is who I am, this is what I care about, maybe a couple of things that you've done. And that, once you go out into the job market, that's just very helpful for people to say, oh, I can go to this website and figure out who this person is. So some of those are easier than others, but I think that you can try those. Should you go to graduate school? Some very broad answers to this, okay? Go to graduate school if you like school and you're good at it. Okay, if you have a 2.6 GPA and it's been miserable, don't go to graduate school, right? If you have a 3.5 or higher and school gives you energy and it helps you, in good ways, then you should go. I think that the world is, particularly for analytical type of careers, graduate school is becoming increasingly necessary for a lot of careers. I think you should go between the time you graduate and 3 years after you graduate. Most graduate schools really give you freedom to do whatever you want for a couple of years after college. But after about 3 or 4 years, you kind of got to figure that out. So if you're not ready to go out right after school, don't, right? But start making a plan 2 or 3 years after. You really should go if you need an advanced skill set that you are not getting out of college. And that could be an analytical skill set, it could be a writing skill set, it could be some stuff that would really help you zoom in on the profession that you want. And again, I think more and more the world is asking, if you want to be a senior person in an analytical, educational, professional, or management position, you've got to have graduate school. And so it's something that I think will affect quite a few of you in the next 5 years. And again, that takes a lot of the pressure off of the technical skills you get in college because graduate school is going to be the place that really propels you to do those things. It's not for everybody. But it can be quite important. If you do go, okay, I wouldn't go in Middle East studies. You can actually go in Middle East studies, but I wouldn't. I would go in an academic discipline or in a professional track, okay? So figure out what professional training do I want to get, or if I'm going to go into a more of an academic discipline, is it political science, is it history, is it linguistics, is it literature, whatever it is you want to really zoom into that discipline. And we're tailoring the MESA major, beginning in the fall to give you more disciplinary experience so that you can do that. But right now you can certainly do it too. Just have a minor in whatever discipline you want. Graduate school can be very expensive. You are all really lucky you went to a really good cheap school. Okay, you're luckier than a lot of the people out there going to graduate school. But you want to be pretty thoughtful about how much it's going to cost versus the expected payoff of doing it. And that's particularly clear with some things like law school, where, if you go to law school, you should really go to a top law school if you can get in, or a cheap law school. But don't go to a really expensive middle-tier law school. It just creates really interesting and problematic debt burdens for you. And then finally, the time to be ready to go to graduate school is essentially the fall before you want to go. So for some of you that's in college, some of you that's after college, but you need to have taken whatever test you need to take for that track, right? GRE for the academic tracks, GMAT for business, LSAT for law, and CAF for medicine. You need to have a pretty broad list of preferred schools, one that has stretch schools you think is going to be hard to get into for you, but you would love to go to. Schools you might have a 40-50% chance of getting into, and then maybe 1 or 2 safety schools. Some people apply to 8, 10, 12 law school, or graduate schools. And so it's kind of a big process. And it usually takes about $1,000 to do all of that process. And then start getting professors on board. So for most law schools, you need to have 3 letters of recommendation. It's much better as a professor to write a letter of recommendation for somebody you've worked with. You've had at least 2 classes with them. They've worked as a TA or an RA or something like that. So the more experiences you can get working with professors before graduate school who can then write a credible letter saying, this person, right, is really good at this stuff, and this is why. This is because I've seen it. Much easier to write that letter than a letter where I've had one person in one class 2 years ago, and they got a B+. It's just it's not going to end up being that compelling of a letter compared to somebody that you really know. So start to build those relationships with people who can recommend you and have a good sense for your strengths. Yeah.
I don't know if you're going to talk about this, but if I'm a freshman and I want to have that happen, how do I get to be that close with professors?
Yeah. So BYU has an interesting model, which is that at the 100 and 200 levels classes, you're just in a huge class, right? And you do a lot of work with TAs. The great thing about BYU, though, is that once you move beyond the 1 to 200 level classes, they tend to get smaller. And at that point, it becomes easier. So your TA interaction is much less. You should, just as a general rule, you should go to office hours for a professor every single semester, every single class, right? To talk about things that matter to you, right? To talk about approaches to the things you're studying. It might take 20 minutes, right? So overall, it might take 2 hours of your life per semester to do that. But that might not develop a huge relationship with a professor, but it will at least start getting you thinking, who is interesting to me? What do I want to do? What ideas am I excited about talking about? I think that's a great idea. A really good way at BYU, though, is TA, RA, or do mentored research with a professor. So apply for an ORCID grant, have a professor mentor your internship or field research. But in the MESA program, there are 5 or 6 teaching assistantships at each year, and there are probably at least that many research assistantships over the course of a year across the MESA faculty. So if you're a strong student, right, and you can make a compelling case that you should be a TA or an RA, try to do that at least once, and that's the best way. Do you have any other thoughts on that, Ben?
I don't know, I especially like that with the MESA major because you have all the faculty usually at least once or twice, and so you get to know them well.
Yeah, I think we're better positioned.
Yeah.
Plus, we've got nice faculty.
Exactly.
So we're better positioned to do that than a major. I mean, even a major like political science, which has 500 majors, right, is a little bit trickier that way. You have to be more proactive about it, but you can. Okay. I think that's the half an hour I promised you. Let me just hear what your questions are, and then we can go back to some of these slides or to some specifics on this. What are the things that keep you up at night? Taylor?
How do you pay for graduate school? What are some of the ways you suggest going about that?
It totally depends on what graduate school you're going to, or what type of graduate school. So was a young man in my office that many of you know. He just left an hour ago, who is being paid to go to law school. That doesn't happen that often. But depending on where you go, you can actually, particularly for a disciplinary graduate school and sometimes in professional graduate schools as well, you can get assistantships, teaching assistantships, research assistantships that will waive your tuition and get you through. For some people, it is the right thing to do to go to a 2-year master's degree where you're paying $40,000 a year. You end up with $80,000 of debt. That might be the right thing to do on the following conditions, right? That is your terminal degree, right? That's the end of the road for you. That it's a really good school that is likely to get you really well placed. But for most people, it's not, okay? So if you can find a better deal, either through a state school or through a BYU type of place where things are so much cheaper here to go to a professional school, then you're just saddled with a lot less debt when you get out, and that just gives you a lot more flexibility in your 20s and 30s to do what you want to do rather than do what you have to do to pay off the debt. There are some debt packages that are conditioned on how much you make at the end of the day, so you want to look into that. Some law schools, for example, will say, if you go into the social sector and you don't make more than $80,000 a year, then your debt load is reduced. There are some graduate schools that say if you go into graduate school with a spouse and kids, we're going to give you extra resources. And so it's really quite conditional on graduate schools. If you're an academic type and you think that you might want to get a PhD, but you're not sure, okay, you should apply to PhD programs instead of master's programs, because you get a master's along the way, but the PhD program pays for it. So I have a student who just emailed me yesterday whose husband is going to medical school in the fall, and she only applied to a few schools in the area where her husband has already committed to going to medical school. But strong students applied to a PhD program, and I got into it with full funding for 5 years. And what that means is that she gets a master's along the way. 2 years into that, she'll get a master's degree, and then if she needs to leave, just decides I'm not going to finish, she leaves with a master's degree, but it's paid for along the way. And that's considered to be okay, right? It's not a breach of ethics to do that, because 5 years is a long time. It's hard to commit that long. But that's one way to think about it. Yeah. Other questions? Dina?
So I've been curious about going into the non-governmental organization sector, but my main hesitation has been if it's at all like a sustainable, like livable career.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you could speak to that a little bit, if it is possible and what needs to be done to make it a sustainable type of career choice.
Sure. It partly depends what sustainable means for you, right? So that means different things to different people. There are lots of NGO type of organizations where you are based in one city, DC or New York or someplace like that, and you can spend your whole career there. Often you'll travel a little bit, right? But those jobs tend to be sustainable. If you are a refugee field worker, right, for CARE or something, or for the UNHCR, then they may expect you to be out and about on a regular basis in very difficult circumstances, right? And it's going to be hard to send your kids to kindergarten and do all the other things that you want to do while you're being transferred every 18 months to Tanzania or wherever you're going. But there are people out there who want to do that. And so typically organizations have a way of allowing people to self-select into the people that want a bit more stability and those that want a little bit more adventure. And that changes as your life goes on. You go through cycles in that way. So I would not discount that. You can do that immediately, right? The other thing people are concerned about often with NGO work is that you just don't get paid as much as you need. And that can be true. There sometimes, I don't think it has to be this way, but there sometimes is a trade-off where the kind of things that people find really interesting and really support their values, like teaching second grade, for example, right? Get paid less than, filing tax returns for big corporations who are evil, doing terrible things to the environment or something, right? And there tends to be a monetary compensation in the marketplace to do work that no one really finds exciting or valuable. But I'm optimistic that you, particularly at this time, of the economy, can create the kind of career you want to create. So much is available to do from a distance now, right? There's just so much flexibility in terms of bouncing from one type of role to another type of role in relatively short order, that I think that the first thing you need to do is figure out who you want to be. What's the kind of person you want to be, right? What skill set do you want to become that person? And then go find a career that gives you that skill set, that gives you energy, that makes you a better person. And if you come to a career with energy and ideas and are willing to work hard at it, right, those things are all going to start to pay off. So I would start from that place and then deal with the reality of saying, this job pays me $10,000 more a year than this job, and those trade-offs when they come. But I wouldn't start from that. Yeah, Emily?
So I'm looking at applying to law school, and I've noticed this as I've looked at schools, but you said a lot of them require about 3 letters of recommendation from professors. So if you're applying to 8 different law schools, can you have the same professors write the same letter for 8? Okay,
Absolutely. You can do that with any graduate school. In law school, it's even easier because there is the LSAC, which is a letter that a professor writes one letter and you can use it to any law schools you want. So if you approached me for a letter for law school, right, I would write one letter, it would be the LSAC, and it would go into the Law School Admissions Council's file, which is what that stands for, and you can use that letter applying to any law school. If you are going to, say, master's programs that are not professional programs, so let's say you're going to master's programs in conflict studies or something, right? Then your professor actually needs to write a separate letter for every school that you apply to. So this year, I've written about 75 letters, okay? And probably 20 of those have been individual letters, like the original letter. And then 55 of those are letters I've tweaked for different schools for the same person. All right, so if you were applying for 8 different schools in public policy, for example, I would write the core letter and then I would tailor it with a sentence or 2 for each of the programs that you're applying to. Let me just give you a few tips from the professor side on the asking for letters, okay? Because I've seen students do this really well and I've seen students do this really poorly. So it is a bad idea to send out a floater email to a professor saying, hey, just wanted to check in, see how you're doing, just thinking about applying to something, wondering if you could write me a letter of recommendation. And I will write back and say, oh, I'm happy to help, I'll try to help out with that. When does that due? I say, well, let's do it at the end of this week. And that never goes over that well, okay? If you have a really good relationship with a professor, they might be willing to do that for you, right? If they're not doing, the 25 things that are on their to-do list that are overdue already, right? The way to do this is to say, start and have this conversation by September of the year you're applying. Say, this is what I'm thinking about. I'd love some advice in terms of thinking about the kind of programs I'm applying to. Do that with a few people so you get different kinds of advice. come up with your list of schools. You can use some of the rankings. You can go on the websites. You can figure out who's at what schools that you might be interested in working with. And talk to them. Send in one document, like an Excel sheet or a Word document, these are the schools I'm going to apply to this fall. School, title of program, deadline. All in one place, so it's not in 12 different emails. Say, you've got 8 weeks or so to do this, and just wanted to see what information you might need from me. Typically what I ask for is a draft of your personal statement. So if you're applying to law school, what are you telling the law school about why you want to go to law school? I want to make sure my letter is consistent with what you're telling them. Right? I want to know what your core interest is. It's often good to just say, here's an unofficial transcript. These are the courses I've had. This is my one-page resume, and any other information that the person wants to be able to write a component letter. And then, for a first-time letter, it usually takes about an hour and a half to write that, right? And then all professors that I know keep letters on file, so that when you come back to them in 2 years and say, I would really like you to write another letter, they can go back and update that older letter. It might not sound like a huge deal to ask a professor for a letter that takes an hour to write, but when you've got 25 of those to write, right, at a wide range of deadlines over the course of the next 2 months, it's really stressful. So just do it well. Yeah.
About becoming an RA or TA, what other tips do you have on what works and what doesn't work?
To become one? At BYU is a good place to become an RA as an undergraduate because there are so few graduate students, right? In your major there aren't graduate students, which means that if you were at Stanford, all of the RA TA shifts would be taken by graduate students. Undergraduates don't get them, but BYU you do. So that's one of the benefits of being here. To be a TA, you should have taken that class before, and you should have taken it with that professor, ideally. And you should have received a grade in the top 10, 20% of the class. That tends to be something that a professor would look for, right? If you're nice and pleasant to get along with and you express interest, then that means that you're going to be a good candidate for that. Typically, classes that have TAs are 30 people or above, although I think 350 and Model Arab and some other things are small. Yeah, we make exceptions once in a while. But professors start thinking about TAs a semester in advance, so you need to also start thinking about it a semester in advance. You don't want to think about it 2 weeks before the semester starts. And just ask. Just say, hey, this is something I'm interested in. If you have any TA opportunities, I'd be interested in that. Most professors in our department also have 1 or 2 RAs at any given time. And that RAs work between 5 and 10 hours a week, and they work on bibliographies and data collection and data coding, and they do some analysis, and good language skills are helpful, good statistical skills are helpful, depending on what the person's working on. And all you need to do is you just need to approach a professor and say, I would be really interested in any RA opportunities you have. It usually takes a little bit of time for them to think through when that would be appropriate and what projects, right? But BYU is better than the vast majority of universities in the country at giving professors student wage money, which means that I often have more student wage money than I have students who would be willing to use it, because people have papers to write and other things to do, right? So just ask. Just as a reference point, the classes in MESA that have TAs usually are MESA 201, MESA 250, History 240, 241, Poli-Sci 357, 350 sometimes.
Humanities 242.
Humanities 242 has 2 TAs because it's a 75-person class, yeah. So each semester there are usually between 4 and 7 TAs doing MESA things, so there's some usually pretty good opportunities. But I often find that we have set TAs for a class 2 or 3 months in advance, and then somebody comes to me a month in advance, and there's not opportunity at that point. Good question about chicken. Again, on internships, summer you can do that. Washington seminar is a really good way to articulate that well, that often works. These are good questions. Other things, I worry that you worry about things. And, we can talk about any concerns that you do have. I would just say that, as a general rule, let's say that you have found a sector that you're interested in. And don't discount the private sector. So, many of you became MESA majors and not business majors because you were interested in other things besides business. When I look out at MESA majors over the last 20 years, I would say more than half of them are in the private sector. Okay? And some of them are doing very interesting things. And so that's the biggest sector of all of these. And there are some interesting things to do there. I worked as a management consultant for a number of years and had a great time. And learned a ton of stuff that I've never learned in school about how to run something and how to solve problems. And so don't discount that largest sector of all. But because sector doesn't determine exactly what you do. So you can work for a big corporation, but do really, really cool, interesting things for them, right? In terms of thinking about risk. I have former students that do risk management in the Middle East for companies. And their job is to figure out political volatility in the Middle East, right? And they get paid to do that, right? And that's what I do for fun, right? When I'm looking for something fun to do. So don't discount that. But the broader point is that when you isolate a sector here, think about what is a step that I can take to validate that this is interesting to me and to begin to get some experience in that. So if you are interested in the public sector, you've just got to go do an internship in the public sector and try it out, right? If you're interested in getting in the NGO sector, go spend the summer doing something crazy, or 8 weeks or something, and learn what life is like for those people. A lot of the humanitarian NGOs in particular live on internships. And they just bring people in, and it's just very easy to go and offer your services and learn a lot from that experience. And then if you want to go to law school, you got to start hanging around lawyers. Right? You got to go see what a law office is like, because there are too many people that end up not actually knowing what it's like to practice law until they have $180,000 in debt, and then they try it out, and it isn't not quite as exciting as they had dreamed. So you really want to just start getting some experiences in each of these areas before you jump on board and commit wholeheartedly. Okay, I'll stay after and answer any other specific questions, but thanks, guys.